For more on this story, our guest is Camille Le Coz, a researcher and Senior Policy Analyst at the Migration Policy Institute. Thank you so much for joining us on France 24 today and answering our questions. Ms. Le Coz, can you tell us about the context of this law? What has been happening in the news recently that gives body to what's going on today in Parliament?
Yeah, the debate on this bill has been extremely politicized, and in the end, we're landing on a project that I would say is not responding to migration issue as they are, as we're facing them at national level, but also on the European and global scene. This debate has been going on for a year. There's been negotiation led by the Minister of Interior, Gérald Darmanin, who is really playing his political future with this bill and has been, negotiating with right-wing party, as your report shows, that are playing very hard to get. And the stakes are very high for the majority. This is not an easy topic because it really calls into our values, and that's a framing that the majority is quite uncomfortable to deal with. We've seen in the past week a new agreement, a new consensus, a compromise was reached in the National Assembly compared to the previous project that was agreed upon at the Senate. But we're seeing today that even this compromise may be under threat, given what might happen in this afternoon when the negotiation on the vote of the bill at the National Assembly will start.
So to give our viewers outside of France a bit of context about what's been happening over the last few months and years, really, there has been, correct me if I'm wrong, a spike in the number of high-profile random attacks, sometimes by people who are undocumented immigrants. Some of them have used extreme violence, like the rape and murder of a 12-year-old girl a year ago, and then there was one as well just a few days ago at the near the Eiffel Tower that targeted tourists. What is the effect of these microaggressions that are relayed in the news and across social media on the national mood?
Yeah, it's clear that with this series of attacks, with all what has happened in the past years, it's led to this conflation between security and migration, and I think has led the public debate to focus on security, while, as we know, migration raised much broader question in terms of labor migration, integration, and other topics. But what it has led to is really to a bill that's focusing on the security measure, on irregular migration, and specifically on return and readmission, with this idea that migrants with a criminal background should be sent back to their country. And as was mentioned, the Minister of Interior has really, make a case that he was really making sure that these people would be sent back to their country.
Ms. Le Coz, you keep referring to other kind of more important things going on with regards to migration in France. What are the real things that, in your opinion, the bill really should be focusing on? What are the major challenges France and maybe Europe, or maybe even the West more generally, are facing when it comes to migration, immigration, legal and illegal?
Yeah, a debate that's very hard to have at this moment in France is the one about labor migration. We've seen after the pandemic how the French economy needed these essential workers. We need people to come here regularly in a way that's organized, that's managed. I think this would be for the benefit of all, of migrants, of France, of the countries of origin. And yet we remain in the system where people come here irregularly, take all the risks at human level, at financial level. And this is leading to an economy that's also informal. So that's really something that we're struggling to have as a discussion. And then the other question is really on integration. How can we better invest in migrants who are here? There's been this fixation on, the fact that migrants should know about the values of the Republic. But what's being proposed at the moment is basically a test to test your knowledge of French value. One can do very well at a test, but it doesn't mean that they've integrated these values. So these are two issues. And I think more broadly, there's a question for France in the word, France as a tradition of asylum. President Macron reminded it in the French press this morning. We've seen this tendency in Europe with some country pushing for the externalization of asylum. And I think this is an area where, France really has a role to play in maintaining asylum a reality in Europe.
Asylum, meaning that people would be sent. Sometimes we're seeing that right now in the UK with Rishi Sunak trying to push a bill to send irregular migrants to Rwanda, for example. Is that something that is out of the question in France, or do you think that there's a day that we could see a French government trying to do what they did in Australia, what they're trying to do in the UK? Is this something that is actually possible?
For now, it's been out of the question. And you mentioned the UK, Australia. We've also seen an EU member state, Italy, kind of bring forward a new agreement with Albania. That's, in itself a form of externalization. This is not something that's been on the agenda so far. And that's an area where, France remains aligned with their values, with the principle of, when people come to France, they can claim asylum. But I think there is a question of how do we make sure that this right is effective, and I think that's really something that is worth fighting for.
Thank you so much for joining us and answering our questions. Camille Le Coz, Senior Policy Analyst at the Migration Policy Institute, on this topic that is very heated and being debated in Parliament in France today.